Anxiety can seep into so many parts of your life. For many anxiety sufferers, anxiety can even begin to affect their ability to travel and go on vacation. So even though traveling may have previously brought you a lot of happiness and excitement, it can now cause you a lot of anxiety. What can happen is that instead of looking forward to and getting excited about traveling, you end up dreading it and might even start canceling trips. What happens is you worry about being far away from home and having bad anxiety. You worry that you'll be far away from your safe place, surrounded by strangers, and have nowhere to escape. These thoughts can rob you of the peace and relaxation that travel and vacations are supposed to bring, and they can ultimately make you lose your confidence in your ability to travel. If this sounds like you, believe me that you're in very good company. A lot of anxiety sufferers will stop traveling altogether as their anxiety gets worse. So today, I'm going to dive into why you're avoiding travel, the reason that anxiety gets worse when you're traveling, and what you're going to do so you can start going on trips again. Let's begin. Before we jump in, I want to give you something for joining me here today. I've put a complete framework for the anxiety recovery process in the link below. It's called the 5-step cure to anxiety and panic attacks, and it's completely free. It'll show you how I personally recovered and the steps you can take to fully recover from your anxiety forever. Again, it's free, and all you have to do is click the link below. All right, if you don't know my story, my own anxiety started with a string of panic attacks and then led me down a path of near debilitating anxiety. Around the time my anxiety first started, I had plans to go to a college football game with a few of my friends. It was the Iowa versus Iowa State game, and since it was a few hours away, we booked a hotel for the Friday night before the game. But in the hotel that night, I couldn't sleep. I instead began having panic attack after panic attack while I was lying there in bed. It became so bad that I ended up getting in my car and driving all the way home at 2 a.m. As you can imagine, I was extremely embarrassed, and I really didn't know how to explain what happened to my friends. From then on, I stopped traveling. I wouldn't leave town, and eventually my anxiety got so bad that I barely left my house. But what I found is there are 3 reasons that anxiety sufferers don't travel. And these reasons are consistent across the board from everyone suffering from anxiety. First, I realized that being in new and foreign places triggered more anxiety. Now, I was already experiencing a ton of anxiety. I was having panic attacks, waves of anxiety, derealization, and a ton of other symptoms. And when I attempted to travel, I found that these symptoms would become even more frequent and intense. So, why does this happen? Okay, here's the thing. Your nervous system is wired to keep you safe. But when you're suffering from anxiety, your nervous system is in a sensitized state. And when your nervous system is in that state, anything that's new or unfamiliar can trigger your anxiety. See, right now, your senses are heightened, and so every little thing can cause a flood of anxiety. And being in foreign places and surrounded by strangers is enough for your body to trigger that anxiety. The second reason is because when we have anxiety, we have an anxious mind. And what happens is when you're traveling, or even leading up to traveling, your mind starts racing with what-if thoughts. You can find yourself worrying, what if I have a panic attack and can't get back to my hotel? What if my anxiety gets so bad that it ruins the whole trip for me? What if I need to go home early? Now, you must realize that these thoughts only make you more anxious. They actually put you in a fearful state and trigger more of the anxiety symptoms that you're afraid of. The third reason is because traveling takes you far away from your safe place. See, traveling means going somewhere unfamiliar, where you can't control your environment. And that can be enough to send your anxiety through the roof. For most of us, we want to be near our safe place, and that's our home. We want to know that when we're having intense anxiety, we can just head on home and be in a controlled environment and inside the privacy and security of our own house. All right, those are the 3 reasons that we get bad anxiety while we're traveling. Now, let's tie these 3 reasons back to my story about having panic attacks and needing to leave the college football weekend. All right, as the trip initially started and I was in my car leaving town, I felt this sense of dread set in. I could feel each mile pass, and I was getting farther and farther away from my safe place. And I soon began convincing myself that going on this trip was a terrible decision. So when we arrived in Ames, Iowa, I hated that I was in a completely new environment so far away from home. And immediately, I began feeling more and more symptoms of anxiety. Meanwhile, my mind was constantly racing with anxious thoughts. I was thinking, where could I go if I start having bad anxiety? What will my friends think if I start having panic attacks? How could I make up an excuse and go home? So those were the kinds of thoughts that were racing through my head. All right, so all three of the elements that we just talked about were present during this trip. I was in a new environment, I was far away from my safe place, and my mind was running wild with anxious thoughts. So it's no surprise that I had panic attacks that night and had to leave the hotel and drive all the way back home. Now, back then, I didn't understand why I was experiencing anxiety, and I didn't even understand what anxiety was. I also hadn't realized that there's a way to instantly stop panic attacks and overcome anxiety forever. So I went on to suffer from anxiety for nearly 2 years before fully recovering. The amazing thing is that after recovering, my wife and I went on a 4-month trip around the world, and we spent time in Uganda, Europe, and Southeast Asia. And I had zero anxiety the entire trip. If you've been following this channel, then you know that each week I'm teaching you how to end your anxiety forever. But if you're new to this channel, then you need to know that your anxiety is being caused by an overactive and sensitized nervous system. What that means is your body is engaging its built-in defense response, also called the fight or flight response, unnecessarily. So it's doing that even though you're not in danger. This flood of adrenaline and stress hormones is causing the intense and frightening sensations that you're experiencing. And because these sensations are so strange and so intense, you become fearful of them. These symptoms feel like they're harmful and they feel like they're dangerous. But the reality, and I want you to listen very closely, is that these symptoms are not harmful in any way. They are not dangerous. They are simply your body preparing to defend itself. So they're actually a sign of your body in an ultra protective state. So the key to recovery is to change how we respond to these sensations and lose our fear of anxiety. That's how we recover, and that's how we never feel this way again. To do that, you need to start implementing the fearless approach that I teach. This is a 4-step response that you engage every time that you experience anxiety. I've put that approach in the link below. And as you get comfortable implementing it, you are going to be able to go and vacation and travel whenever and wherever you want. Now, in the near term, you're still going to be experiencing anxiety during your travels. But the key is that you're experiencing anxiety in the right way. In other words, it's not making you fearful and it's not ruining your trip. Then, with just a bit of time, your nervous system is going to calm down and you will have no anxiety when traveling and going on vacation. This is 100% going to happen, I promise. It just takes a bit of practice. All right, that's it for today. Please hit the like button and the notification button on the way out, and I'll keep posting videos each and every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.